Hi, I'm Candy from Quiltvine, and welcome back to the second video for our holiday pillow sew along. In the first video, we went over how to do the applique for the snowflake and the tree. And in this video, we're going to show you how I do this outline look. It's kind of reminiscent of a hand embroidery, but I do this on the machine, and we'll show you how to do it. Again, we have the snowflake, and we have the tree, which is in the free downloadable pattern. So come along with me and I'll show you how we do this. Okay, to put our pattern onto our fabric, it's easier to make a template and to trace around it than to try to see through our fabric and trace it like we did with the heat and bond on the previous video. So what I'm going to do is we're going to make a stiffer template, because if we just cut the paper out and try to trace around the paper, it's just too flimsy. Your one option is, if you have a printer that you can put cardstock through it, you can copy the pattern onto the cardstock and cut it out, and then you have a nice cardstock template. But if you don't have a printer that you can do that with cardstock, our next option is to make a freezer paper template. So I prefer the Reynolds freezer paper. I've tried generic brands before and it's just not as good. So if you're gonna use freezer paper, I do prefer the Reynolds. So we're gonna do a 3 or a 4 layer thick of freezer paper. You can get away with 3, so I'm only gonna show you 3 today. 4 will make it stiffer. So first thing we need to do is we get a freezer paper and we lay it on top of our pattern and trace it, which I've already done. So I've got my pattern pencil traced onto the freezer paper. So now this is gonna be my top of my freezer paper layer. So I'm gonna put that off to the side. So I'm gonna take a piece of blank freezer paper. These are all about the size of a page, because that's the size I'm starting with. So I'm gonna iron a piece of freezer paper onto my pressing mat, and that's shiny side down. Then I take another piece of freezer paper, shiny side down, and iron it onto the previous one. Then if I want to make it 4 layers thick, which is you can, is then you do another blank sheet. And then on the top, you have to have the piece of freezer paper that you actually traced your pattern onto on the top. So we're going to iron that until all my layers are stuck together. It's like they're all glued together, because you're having the shiny side down on top of the paper side, shiny side down against the paper side, and just they all stick together. So I take that off, and it's nice, thick. It's gonna be my template. It's nice and stiff. So now I'm gonna cut my template out. And I'm gonna start by cutting this long straight line here. I wanna get my little rotary cutter, because you could cut these out with scissors, but I think it's easier to use the rotary cutter. So then we're just gonna start these nice little short, straight lines and cut it with the rotary cutter. And I'm just gonna continue around with that until I have my pattern all cut out. It's nice and stiff, and it will be my template for tracing around. Now that my template, my freezer paper template is made, and it's stiff enough to trace around, I'm almost ready to trace it onto my fabric. So I've got my pillow fabric, and before I trace it on or do any kind of the stitching, I want to stabilize it. You may prefer to use like a tearaway stabilizer or a washout stabilizer. I prefer to use Material Magic, which is a spray. I kind of refer to it as starch on steroids. It can make your fabric as stiff as a board. So I'm going to spray a little Material Magic onto my background fabric, and then I'm going to iron that. It's a good idea if you let it dry a little bit or turn it upside down so I don't get, sometimes it does leave a little bit of residue like a starch would. So let's press that. And I don't know if you'll be able to tell then that my fabric is kind of stiff. And there you can see, it's stiffened my fabric. Now I want to iron a few little registration marks in so I can find my centers. Actually, I might be able to just do it finger pressing it without ironing it. So I'm going to do it into 4ths. And I've got those registration marks. I'm going to move my pressing mat. And I am ready to trace around my pattern. So I'm going to line up the centers here and line up the center there. And now to trace my pattern on to my fabric, I prefer to use a friction marker or a friction pen, which comes off with heat. You could also use like one that comes off with water, but then make sure you don't iron it because that will set it permanently. And that's the reason I needed to iron before I did this, because I couldn't put the Material Magic on after I've traced this on, because the heat from ironing it would have made my tracing disappear. So see, as I have this template, it's much quicker than trying to see through the fabric, or, you know, like if you would use a light box or something. And it does make it so much easier that it's stiffer than paper. So several layers of freezer paper does make a nice template. And I'm just going to continue tracing that, and then I'll flip it over and trace the other half. And I don't know how well it shows up. I've got the red marker on the green fabric. And there I have my snowflake. It is all traced on. Now, I already have it stabilized and it's traced on, and so I'm ready now to go to my machine and start stitching. Before you get started, you can take a scrap piece of fabric and we're going to play with our stitch. I like this asterisk stitch. I use that a lot when I do this kind of a stitching around the outside of something. This is the generic setting. The width was 7.0 and the length was 2.5. I thought that was a little big. Here I tried it with, I kept the length the same and changed my width down to 5.0. And then here I tried, kept it 5.0 as the width and put the length down to 2.0. And I've decided to go back to this middle one here. So my length is 2.5 and my width is 5.0. This has a stabilizer in it, so it's kind of stiff, and I'm ready to begin. And it really is helpful when you do something like this if you have the needle down position. It's also helpful if you have an open toe foot. For this machine, I do not. My feet do change out from my other machine that I have at home, but I'm at the shop, and this is the machine that I keep at the shop. So I'm gonna go. I've got my boots on. I've got a weird sewing boots on. So you can see here, I'm just gonna keep going till I get to the corners, and you want to leave needle down when you pivot. Okay, I'm in the center. Whoops, I didn't have needle down. I should have had needle down. Okay, leave my needle down. Then I lift up my foot and turn it around. And do it again. And we're just going to keep doing that the whole way around. And then I will continue to show you with the other one that I did with the red on the white. And we'll continue from there. I really don't have any intention of finishing this one. This was just scrap fabric I found upstairs here at the shop. And I just wanted to show you how to do it. And oops. So I'm not going to continue with this one. I could. there you can see the stitching. And then because this is a friction marker, I can just take that and iron it when I'm done, and the red will go away. And here we have my black towel with my white snowflake stitched on it, and that is good for the entire winter. I actually probably won't put this out until after Christmas, but it's great for all winter. That's the good thing about snowflakes. You use red or green or something like that, and it's a great Christmas project. And yeah, you do something like that and it's good for all year. Here I've got the pillow, the red on the pillow that I've been working on, the same design using that asterisk design to stitch on there, and this will be a pillow for the holidays. And these are the holiday projects that I've done using the stitching around the outline. I do prefer to use the asterisk stitch like we went over in the video, but there are other stitches you can use. This one's a little bit different. So just pick a decorative stitch on your machine and have fun with it. Thanks for joining me.